And welcome again to Storytime with Dave Booker. Appreciate you coming back. Glad you're with me. Today we're going to continue on with Time Is, Time Was. We're going to read Now He Belongs to the Ages. If you remember in the last reading, at the end of it, Don was going through the mail and he saw this message from my brain is not functioning very good. He got a message from Scott. God, help me. Okay, got a message from Scott saying, hey, come bring some money. You got clothes here. Room's already reserved at the hotel. Just pop on through. And he showed it to Honey, and Honey was like, I don't think this is a pleasure trip, this one. Neither of them even realized what the date was. So we're going to continue on with Now He Belongs to the Ages. That'll be the last story we read from this one. And then we go to Time Is, Time Was, Time Will Be, and start there for the next few chapters. So let's get going on this one. Now He Belongs to the Ages. The hotel bedroom suite was elegantly furnished. Comfortably ensconced in one of the deep leather armchairs was Scott. His smile was tinged with sadness. Sorry to pull you away from Honey, but I felt you'd want to be here. I looked around trying to get my bearings. Would you mind telling me where and when we are? Scott pulled a sheet from his pocket and handed it to me. It was a notice for the funeral of Abraham Lincoln. I dropped into a chair, still staring at the notice. Scott put a hand on my arm. I wasn't sure if you wanted to be here for this, but I tell you, I needed you here. I looked at Scott and saw tears in his eyes. I know we only met him for a short time, but he called us his friends. I felt we owed it to him to be here. He didn't have to tell me. I agreed. What day and time is it? I asked, and for one, Scott simply told me. Today is April 19th, 1865, and the time is 0600. As you should know, since you set Fred up to get here. I looked startled, true, but I was doing things too fast for them to register. Scott pointed to a notice on the program. The main ceremony is at 0800. We'll have to be at the East Room in the White House by 7:30. I sat there with my mouth open. I thought we might do the walkthrough, but we were going to the funeral ceremony. I wanted to be at the ceremony, so I got us tickets. Scott rose and reached for his hat. I ran to the closet and quickly got changed. When I came out, Scott retied my tie and adjusted my collar. I did the same for him, and we walked out of the hotel into the sunshine. I couldn't help feeling it should be raining. There was such an aura of sadness in the air. People were lining the streets, standing on the rooftops, hanging out the windows. There were even people in the trees. Black ribbons bordered windows and black banners draped balconies. Washington, D.C., dressed in mourning. We made our way with a gathering throng, all going to the Treasury building. We showed our tickets and were placed in line to wait our turn to enter the White House by way of the East Wing, where the funeral would be held. For so many people, it was surprisingly quiet. People talked in whispers when they did talk. Men stood with heads bowed, turning their hats in their hands, and women held handkerchiefs and dabbed their eyes. As the line moved forward, you could hear the tap of canes and the rustle of skirts. I glanced aside at Scott, trying to place his age and what time period he had just come from, but his face told me nothing. He looked at me and smiled. The look in his eye told me we would talk later. It took a while, but we were finally in the next group to enter the East Wing. I was a little shaky as we made our way out from the sunshine across the lawn and into the East Wing. In the center was a raised platform with Lincoln's open coffin. A black curtain canopy draped over and around it. We passed in front of the coffin and then to the far wall, about 5 rows to the back. People continued to file in as the sound of cannon, fire, and bells filled the air, muted slightly by distance. I'm not ashamed to say, but my tears fell, as did those of many others. Scott, overwhelmed with emotion, gripped my arm and leaned on his walking stick. I've been to a few funerals in my life, but never have I been to one where the emotions were so palatable. The cannon fire and bells slowly died in the distance, and a great hush fell on the assembly. It was now 12:10. Dr. Phineas Gurley, who was, I learned, the Lincoln family pastor, announced the order of the proceedings. He spoke clearly, but his eyes were red and there were bags under them from lack of sleep. First to speak was Dr. Charles Hall, who read the burial service of the Episcopal. He spoke from the book of Job, Corinthians, and Timothy. He spoke with his eyes toward Lincoln. His soft voice, though shaking with emotion, still carried throughout the hall. Next came the Methodist Church, represented by Bishop Simpson, who spoke for a long time, his voice ringing out with emotion as he thundered through the opening prayer. He ended with the Lord's Prayer, in which everyone joined. After Bishop Simpson, Dr. Gurley returned to give the funeral sermon. His was a powerful one, which spoke on Lincoln's character, the love felt by all for him, and how his character was best suited for the trying times our country passed through. He spoke of, he spoke of Lincoln as the father of a nation divided and then healed. It was too much to try and condense it into a short blur, but it moved all who were there, and I doubt there was a dry eye by the time he finished. Excuse me. The Senate chaplain, Baptist pastor Dr. Edwin Gray, gave the closing prayer. His was thankfully short, as we had been standing for hours and my legs were beginning to buckle. We waited in silence as the coffin was closed and the veteran's corpse carried it outside to a horse-drawn hearse. Once more, the bells pealed as the hearse was drawn slowly to the train. All the people packed into the east wing made their way somberly towards the exits. People spoke more freely as they were released back into the world again and could become people instead of mourners. Scott took my elbow and led me back to the hotel where we could get some food and a drink. Seated in the comfort of the dining room, we ordered a couple of steaks and mushroom pies, and a beer. Scott looked at me appraisingly. "You look well, Don. I think you and Honey must be happy together." I agreed and told him about our trip to the Middle Ages, going over the parts he wasn't there for. "You know, that was several years ago, my time." He sat there looking thoughtful for a moment. "I didn't want it to take up too much of your time, but it was very nice to meet Honey and even better seeing you. I miss traveling with you, even though I am traveling with you now. Funny how confusing this has become." I was hesitant for a second and excused myself, saying I needed the bathroom. Well, that was true, but the one I used was at home. After I took care of business, I asked Honey about the possibility of having Scott with us on the trip to the Renaissance. She went to the closet and pulled out an outfit she had made for Scott, using some of the his clothes as a guide. Then I knew this was probably going to happen, so I figured I should be prepared. It'll be a couple of days more until I have everything set up, so why don't you and Scott spend a couple of days together? I called the apartment, my old one's still open. I took it for 6 years and had it furnished. Either Scott can live there or he can live here and we can move back. Either way is fine. Picked her up off the floor and kissed her tenderly. I appreciated her generosity so much. She really did know me so well, it was frightening. In fact, it was beginning to look like they both knew me better than I knew myself. I kissed her again and went and adjusted Fred so I would show back a couple of minutes after I returned home. I was about to step through and a shriek from Honey stopped me cold. "Don't move," she wailed as I stood there stock still. She ran up behind me and, lifting my leg, pulled a streamer of toilet paper from my heel. She pushed me with a "love ya," and my nose hit the wall near the bathroom. You know, this kind of arrival could get old quickly. Arriving. Tea's not helping. Arriving, I do apologize. I can do this, I promise. Arriving back at the table, Scott was sitting there smiling and shaking his head as I approached, massaging my nose. Scott, we're planning on going to the Renaissance in Vienna. Maybe look up DaVinci. Why not come along? He shook his head again, laughing. Don, I know you well enough that you wouldn't offer without checking with Honey first. Since you are offering, I can assume she has given the okay, and since I know her well enough in the short span of time I did meet her, to know she would not have given her the okay unless she really meant it. So I accept. I looked at him with amusement. How can you say all that without stopping for breath? I tossed off the last of my beer and asked for a couple more. I was feeling more relaxed and cheerful being in Scott's company. I know you were wondering where and what I am now. I've just left you at the Rutledge dining table. I was feeling overwhelmed and decided to try and change history just as you did. Well, I should have known better, but my emotions were in control, not my reason. I arrived on the day Lincoln went to the Ford's Theater and stopped in to see him. I shone in since he had seen me before and remembered both of us fondly, it seems. He still tells about throwing you into the tree. He had hoped we would have stayed longer, but New Salem didn't pan out the way they expected. He moved away too. We talked for quite a while, even though I'm sure there are more pressing matters waiting his attention. As we were talking, a message came in reminding him that he and Mary were to go out for a carriage ride in a little while. He slowly got up and shook hands with me. Sorry, Scott, but I have to go. I wouldn't disappoint Mary. Never heard the end of it, he said, and he turned towards the door. I offered to look him up in the evening and even offered to treat him to dinner. He turned me down. I tried to dissuade him from going to Ford's Theater, and he was not to be dissuaded. I went to Ford's Theater to try and change things there. I was turned away when I tried to get into his box. They wouldn't take in a message. I went to the stage door to try and block Booth, but was told he hadn't come in, and since he wasn't in the production, he wouldn't show up. Little did I suspect he was already in the theater and had already made his way to Lincoln's box. I heard a shot and the sound of Booth leaping onto the stage. I tried to hold Booth, but was pulled away from him by the stage doorman. It all happened so fast. I'm running out of tea. I even tried, there you go, another attempt so that I was in two places at the same time, trying for different angles to stop Booth coming in earlier, and waiting outside the back door when Harold and Booth arrived. I was talking to Booth when Harold struck me on the head and threw me behind some logs. So desperate, I decided to try a third time and placed myself at the staircase near Lincoln's door, but was shot in the leg for my troubles. You know, my theory seems to be correct, and nothing we do will change anything. There's one time I wished I was wrong. There was nothing left to do now but mourn with the rest of the nation. I sent you a message a couple of days ago, and I'm glad you got it and did as I requested. He sat there sadly drinking his beer. I thought he might be better for a change and asked, well, do you want to stay here or tonight or come back with me now? He looked up eagerly. If you don't mind, I want to go now. I could use a little of yours and Honey's cheerful company. We paid up, went to my room. I took my clothes from the closet and pressed the return. I was able to walk through, but not Scott. His return was still set for his time and not mine. I went back, took his return with me, and reset so he could come through. There's a note here. Why could his return come and not Scott? Once separated from Scott, the unit is inert and doesn't register. Red has a biosensor that won't allow a person or animal through unless they are wearing a return. As he walked through, Honey jumped up from her sewing and gave Scott a hug and a kiss that made his face grow red. So, next chapter is home. However, we will not be reading that one. Unless I get a lot of requests to, and then I'll be more happy to. But We're going to do Time Is, Time Was, Time Will Be, the next book in the Time Is series next. And we'll start, let's see, where does it start? Oh, this is kind of like a little bit more farther in the future, where the first chapter is a look back, and it kind of goes over them living in their house and the way things are now. So that'll be kind of interesting to read. We're going to work our way through all of my books, and hopefully you'll continue to come in and watch these with me. I'm enjoying reading these, even if I can't speak really well. I do apologize, but hopefully I will improve, or I'll be doing these sign language next. My daughter's teaching me. So I appreciate you coming by. I appreciate you visiting with me. I appreciate you listening in on these stories, and please comment. Let me know what you think of them. I really do appreciate the comments that I get, but I've been getting some on my other sites, not through here. So, all right, that's all I've got. We'll sign off, and be good to yourselves. Have a good day, and take care. So I'm going to reach over for my mouse. Sweet. And bye.